안녕하세요. So awkward. 안녕하세요. I'm Anya, and welcome to my new YouTube channel. So you might be thinking, wow, what a time to move internationally. Yes, it was a time. So I want to talk a little bit about moving in the middle of coronavirus. I'm gonna try to put in as many pictures as I can, pictures and videos from the move, but I had my old iPhone, which had almost no storage left on it and was like really struggling every time I tried to take a video. And also it was a little weird. Like, I almost feel like if there were a bunch of people, it's way less awkward to take a video, but there was no one. There was like no one in the airport, no one in security, nobody on our plane, barely. I think there were like 20 people on the whole plane. So yeah, it was a little bit awkward to take video. So I'm gonna put in as many pictures as I can to give you guys an idea of what it was like in the really, really empty airports. So I won't go into all the details now, but basically I've been living in Seoul or I had been living in Seoul for over 4 years, just about 4 years. And then it came time because of my husband's job. He's Japanese. We had to move to Tokyo, which we knew was coming, but we didn't expect that it would come so quickly. So that was a little bit of a shock. We sort of had assumed that they would push it back or like wait until things had settled a little bit. Instead, we sort of had to come in the middle of like when they were like, no foreigners allowed into the country. I was a special exception because I'm married. It was pretty surreal, just like even being in the airport. We flew out of Incheon and into Narita because there were no other options. There was something like 1 flight per week going from Seoul to Japan. And this was like the middle of May. Everything was fine at Incheon, actually. There was just nobody there. I hung out with the robot.
I'll show you what amenities you can have before leave. 탑승 상황 확인하시고 늦지 않게 게이트로 이동하세요. Please check the flight status of yours and please get the gate on time.
There were no people around. The flight was fine, and then everything got a little bit crazy when we landed in Tokyo. We landed at Narita and they had given us like a ridiculous amount of paperwork before we landed. Notices and forms to fill out and like all the regular things that you have to fill out, like the immigration and customs thing that they give you anyway. But then on top of that, it was like, have you been to any of these places? Which of course we had. Korea was one of those places. So we had to put yes, like we've been to a potentially infected area, and like all this personal information and where we're staying and who's bringing us to our house and blah blah blah. But then when we landed, we were on the plane for almost an hour sitting. But we never really figured out why we had been just sitting on the plane, except that I think they were like trying to limit, maybe do like 1 flight at a time through the like customs and immigration stuff once we got out. So it's a totally different day. I'm just gonna put an interjection in here. I wiped the memory of getting the actual corona test from my mind completely. I think it was actually kind of traumatic for me, and I think my brain just decided to completely forget about it right after we got off the plane finally and deplaned deplaned. We had to register at a little kiosk, and then they had a couple of makeshift nurses stands set up. So everyone had to go in and do the nose swab test. I'm extremely freaked out when it comes to needles, medical stuff, anything going in anywhere. It's blah. So I went in and she started to stick the Q-tip up there. I freaked out and squirmed, and so she took it out and she was like, "You can't move," and I just started crying, as you do. And so it took me about 5 good minutes to calm myself down enough, and then I just sat on my hands and let her do it. My nose did bleed afterwards. I think just like the skin got irritated or something. It wasn't like a full-on nosebleed, but it was bleeding, and it was not fun. I don't want to scare anybody that has to take the test. I've heard that people are like, "Oh, it's uncomfortable," but it's totally fine. So for those of you who are mildly anxiety prone or have issues with that kind of medical stuff like I do, it might not be the most fun you've ever had, but I lived, so you'll be fine. My husband is Japanese, so he took his paperwork and peaced out, went and got our luggage. I was stuck in immigration for 3 hours. It's a good 3 hours. Unlike Korea, where they're sort of like, "What are you doing here?" and you're like, "Oh, here's my visa and my passport," because I had my visa in my passport even in Japan. But in Korea, they if you have your visa, they let you into the country, and then you have to go get your foreigner registration card, or your ID card. In Japan, they give it to you at the airport. They make it for you at the airport. So yeah, there was really no way around it. I mean, I felt bad for everybody working. You'd think, since foreigners aren't allowed into the country right now, that there would be no foreigners except me. But there was a huge group of Chinese, a family, a big family. And I don't know, they didn't really speak Japanese, and Japanese staff didn't speak Chinese, and I think it just made the process really, really long. Our poor friend waited for us for a total of 5 hours in his car outside of the airport because we couldn't do anything. We couldn't take a taxi. Not that I would take a taxi from the airport in Japan anyway, because it would be $200. But we couldn't take a taxi, we couldn't take the train, we couldn't take a bus or anything considered public transportation. We could have probably rented a car. We looked into it, but with me having waited 3 hours, I'm not even sure how that would have worked. So thank you to our friend who picked us up at the airport. And then it was about an hour and a half drive home to our new house that only I had seen before. That's story for another day, perhaps. Finding a house in Japan. Honestly, moving in it before we actually got on the plane to come to Tokyo, packing and moving in the middle of Corona was not the most fun. Usually in Korea, if you pack up a bunch of boxes that you want to ship by EMS, you usually they'll come from the post office and pick them up. You can schedule a pickup. But because of Corona, for whatever reason, I'm not really sure how it has anything to do with anything, but they were not picking up anything during Corona. So we had 14 boxes, which is not a huge amount for moving internationally. We didn't bring any furniture. We only had our 14 boxes and what was in our suitcases. So it wasn't like a ton of stuff, but oh, I keep looking over here because there's my boxes. Haven't gotten around to unpacking those yet. Those were the boxes that we shipped by ship, and we were told that they would take like 2 to 3 months to get here, and they took 3 weeks. So actually, I wasn't really prepared to receive them. I was kind of looking forward to them taking 3 months because it's like books and winter clothes, and we really don't need it right now, and I don't have all of the like storage stuff set up for it, so they're living right there. Okay, so selling all of our stuff and packing all of our stuff and getting all of our stuff to the post office and all of that was made 10 times harder by all of the corona stuff, and that was in Korea, which honestly has been doing a really great job. I know it's been in the news all over the place. I was really proud of Korea this time for really staying on top of it and doing a good job of keeping it as contained as possible and just giving people the information that they needed to keep themselves safe, which I think was one of the most important factors. Like, since we could just check where the paths or the places that were visited by infected people, it made everything a lot easier, I think. So anyway, that was totally off topic. The move was the most interesting move I have ever made. Let's leave it at that. I hope you guys enjoyed hearing a little bit about our move from Seoul to Tokyo. I will go more into detail about finding a house in Japan and other parts of that story if you guys are interested. I'd also love to know what kind of things you guys would like to see. I'll show you guys the Japanese apartment. Our apartment is new. It was finished being built in December of last year. So we are the first people to live in it, and so I guess it's a good example of like what new apartments look like in Japan. And I'm also going to be talking about my work a little bit because I think you guys would be kind of interested in that. Some people have expressed interest in hearing about working for Korean companies, working in the Korean entertainment industry, and what I do for work now that I'm in Japan. So I want to talk about that as well. So let me know in the comments if there's other things that you are interested in seeing or want to know about. I'll be back soon. Thanks.